Councilmember Kugler, can you hear us?
I can. I'm just fixing my camera as well.
Thank you so much.
We're ready to go. Kimmer City Council is now in session pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101I. The City Council will now enter an executive session to discuss pending or potential litigation. It is expected to last 45 minutes. Are we recording, clerk?
Yes, we are.
All right, the Kenmore City Council has come out of executive session. The chair would entertain a motion to authorize the city manager and city attorney's office to proceed with filing a lawsuit against Zipley Fiber for damages and costs incurred by the city and the Juanita Drive Northeast Pedestrian and Bicycle Improvement Project number T41 20-C2144, excuse me, resulting in conflicts with Zipley Fiber facilities and to take all other steps necessary to implement this motion.
So moved, Councilmember File.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to authorize the city manager and the city's attorney office to proceed with filing a lawsuit against Zipley Fiber for damages and costs incurred by the city in the Juanita Drive Northeast Pedestrian and Bicycle Improvement Project, number T41 20-C2144, resulting from conflicts with Zipley Fiber's facilities and to take all other steps necessary to implement this motion, seconded by Councilmember Shrubnik. Councilmember File.
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Councilmember Baker.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Kane.
Yes.
And Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 7 yeses and 0 nos, the motion passes.
All right, we're now adjourning the special meeting and calling the regular meeting of the Kenmore City Council to order. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Marshall.
Present.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Here.
Councilmember File.
Present.
Mayor Herbig.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Kane.
Here.
Councilmember Baker.
Here.
Councilmember Kugler.
Here.
All present.
All right, would you all please stand and join me in the flag salute? Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Unless there are any objections, the agenda will stand approved as published. Seeing no objections, the agenda stands approved. Next, we have a presentation, the introduction of new staff. Development Services Construction Inspector Miguel Kelley, introduced by Development Services Director Samantha Loyuk.
Good evening, Council. So with me tonight, we have Miguel Kelley, our new construction inspector. If you remember, Miguel is full-time and he is replacing a contract that was valued at approximately $150,000 per year. We are so excited to have Miguel in the department and at the city of Kenmore. Do you want to say a few things about yourself?
Yeah, I came from King County Metro in their design and construction department as a construction inspector. Fun fact, I love my kids, hanging out with my kids, spending time with them, working on cars, and playing sports.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, welcome. We appreciate, we're excited to have you as part of the team and thank you. Welcome to the city.
Thank you for having me.
Next on the agenda, where's the fun?
Well, good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I'm really excited to show you some pictures. And this is a preview of what you'll see if you come to the Squahad's ribbon cutting on May 6th. Jason Sperling is a Kenmore resident and photographer, and he went out on a kayak and took these amazing images. So we want to thank him for his work. And it all started because we were looking for a cover photo for the upcoming quarterly, and he offered to take these photos for us. And then it was too spectacular to not share it as Where's the Fun? So I think we have a few other photos to show. It was another beautiful day in Kenmore. So please come. The community is invited to come at 10 a.m. on May 6th as we officially do have the ribbon cutting for this beautiful park.
I was down there on Friday and I saw people walking around really excited. It was really nice to see in person.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks.
All right, next on the agenda is public comment. We welcome our community members to the council's meeting. In this forum, the council does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary role of the council is to listen. We will hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you're online, please use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. All guests must address comments to the mayor and the city council. The clerk will acknowledge your request and call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when we confirm that we can hear you. Please state your name and city of residence for the record and keep your comments to the allotted time. We will not split time with others or reset your time except by express approval of the presiding officer. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the council or clerk in advance. Please do not comment about pending development projects in which the council will make future decisions, as those are quasi-judicial matters and council members must limit their communications about such matters. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for taking the time to express your comments. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We currently have 8 individuals signed up for on-site public comment, and we'll take them in this order. When you hear your name, please go up to the podium and you'll be given 3 minutes. We'll start with Keith Hunter, followed by Elaine Hunter, and then R.F. Overid.
Yeah, my name is Keith Hunter. I've been living here in Kenmore for a very long time, and I want to reiterate some of the things I spoke about last time, such as how ridiculous boat parking is on Simons Road. I certainly have lots of photographs to show how ridiculous and dangerous it is. I've been after the city for as long as it's been incorporated to do something about this. I would also like to mention that last summer, as soon as the temporary no parking signs went down, the trailer parking resumed, despite the turn lane, as there was never any permanent signs put up to show. I would also like to remind you of the lady that I saw when I spoke last time, trying to navigate the path between the wall and the curb with the cars blowing past her when there was very little traffic and no need to be in that lane from the corner of 73rd. I would like to add the fact that that woman can't get around my mailboxes between the wall and the curb. She would have to go out into the street to do so, and even if there are garbage cans there. This is something she can't possibly do when there's trailers parked there. I would also like to remind you what I said about how terrifying it was to walk my grandson from the school bus stop at 73rd to where my driveway is. As soon as the school bus sign, the stop sign went in, that traffic would come blowing down the curb next to us. It was 7 years ago I came here to address the turn lane problem, and it was David Baker who helped me get it corrected. I would like to remind everybody how much David Baker has done for this community. At that time, the engineers came to look at the situation and they realized how dangerous it was. And that is when the solid line was added, and most people conformed. Tonight, I would like to add something I saw just last Wednesday, 11 a.m., no traffic, bicyclists in the turn lane. Here comes a car, nobody else around, right on this guy's tail. The bicyclist, I don't know whether it was because of how nervous he got, but he pulled into the parking lot at the park. I assumed the car was pulling in there too because of its turn signal, but no, he was simply using that turn lane because he decided to be there. I'm going to ask the city to fix this correctly once and for all. This is the 3rd busiest arterial in the city, and it's not rocket science. It should be obvious the solution is to extend the bike lane to the park entrance where the sidewalk ends and the solid white line ended. The solid white line should also be added as it is in the eastbound lanes.
Thank you. Your time is up. Elaine Hunter.
Thank you. If you don't mind, she lost both her hearing aids and she's too short for this microphone.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hunter, we can't give you extra time.
Attorney, I got one more paragraph to add.
You can submit that to the clerk, but we can't give folks extra time.
R.F. Overid. followed by Scott Olson and Steve Yoder.
I followed just about everything he said. And whoever put that line in for the right turn lane and moved it up to 73rd, that was totally idiotic. You can walk that up the sidewalk right there, and when you have cars coming by you at 45 miles an hour, 40 to 45. I've lived there since 1974, and it's dangerous. And it's just a matter of time before somebody gets killed, their dog gets killed. End that line at the other end of the park driveway, and you'd be fine. All I got.
Mr. Overd, will you state your city of residence for the record, please?
Kenmore.
Thank you.
Scott Olson, Kenmore, Washington, 7008 and 7002, neighbors of both of these. Yeah, I've lived here since '68, so it's gotten worse. And that side of the road, you're taking your life in your hands when you get your mail. It needs to be extended to the bike lane and not have parking there because it's just been a mess. That's about it. Keith sort of summed up most of it, but yeah, we really need to fix it. And then if we were to put sidewalks on that side would be even better, but because there's no room in between the mailboxes and the side. It's just, even for bicyclists and anybody coming, you know, very, very dangerous. Thank you.
Steve Yoder, followed by Dennis Quinn.
Hi, Mayor and distinguished council members. I sent out an email with some information in advance. It didn't go out until Saturday, so I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to see it. But I live at Inglewood Shores here in Kenmore. And I'm just going to read so that others are aware of this issue that I'm speaking about tonight. And it's the danger in an intersection of 68th and Inglewood Road Northeast as you're turning right into the Inglewood Shores, Inglewood Golf Club community there. I've been told of at least 2 near-miss accidents at that intersection when vehicles are turning right and bicyclists do not stop at the light. What brought this to my attention was a fellow resident came and told me about an accident that she had Tuesday afternoon where she was turning right and couldn't see a bicycle coming down the bike path, and it slammed into the side of her car. Caused about $700 damage to her vehicle, but more concerning was the health of the rider, the cyclist, which fortunately was okay. I reached out since then to Craig McCrone, the manager at Inglewood Golf Club on Saturday. I talked to him and I asked him if he had heard of anything. And he replied with this. He said, yeah, there was another accident on Tuesday morning. So the same day, the guy who was hit was rattled. He walked into the men's locker room dressed in bike racing gear, looking for an Allen wrench to adjust his seat back to its normal position. I asked him what I could do for him. He said he was hit going about 20 miles an hour by a lady who turned into him. I asked him twice if he was okay. He said he wasn't sure. I asked if he hit his head and he said he wasn't sure. He was probably in shock, likely had a concussion. I know he called the police, which I would have done if he hadn't. So there is a record of the collision. Also, he was able to collect insurance information from the lady to hit him. The bike lanes are dangerous, much safer the way they were previously. I will mention that I spoke in opposition to that 68 reconfiguration. My concern at that time was more selfishly motivated on our ability to turn into our community in a timely manner. Fortunately, that has not come to fruition, but I didn't see this coming. So I wanted to just bring it to your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis Quinn, followed by Karen Grabo, then Doug Edge.
Good evening, council. My name is Dennis Quinn. I'm a resident here in Kenmore. We've been here for over 30 years now. And over that period of time, we've seen the marked increase in the volume of traffic on Northeast 170th. It was interesting, if you look back at when they put the toll back on 520, we saw almost an immediate increase. And then when they put the toll lanes on 405, it increased again. And oftentimes, especially during the summer months, the traffic can be backed up there waiting to make either a turn or go through at 60 onto 68th. Can be backed up on the hill heading up toward Englewood, Inglemore High School, excuse me. But I guess it's more a question that I have of the proposed changes to the bike lanes on 170th. Is this going to have any kind of an impact on the number of cars or the volume that we are currently seeing? I know they're building a lot more up on the hill, multi-unit dwellings and single-family dwellings, but I guess that's my concern and something I'd like to have answered. Thank you.
Karen Grabo.
Karen Grabo, I live off of Simons and 72nd, and I was just concerned about the plans to remove what I understand on Simons Road, turning on to Juanita Drive. I just don't see how that's possible to remove the turn lane. So I'm mostly here just to see what the plan is for that, if it makes more sense than what's there now. I'm interested in hearing that, but I don't have any suggestions. I think the way it's recently been changed, as far as I can tell, the longer distance of that turn lane, and it looks like parking isn't allowed along there. Seems to make sense right now, but I understand people talking about cars driving very fast that close to the sidewalk and the mailboxes. I hadn't even thought of that because I don't walk along there. So that's all. I just wanted to see what the plan is and if it makes more sense than what's there.
Doug Edge.
My concern this evening was regarding the notice we got regarding the potential changes to that lane coming to the 68th. I live also in the same community as Karen off of 72nd. I've lived here for about 20 years, and it's really a pretty nightmarish intersection in the afternoon, early evening. I was just, and let me back up just to say, there's a lot of safety concerns that are going on that I'm really unaware of. So I'll cede to them. My concern is more of a matter of convenience, being unaware of the other things that have been going on. But there's been a lot of changes over the recent years with regard to that intersection. It used to have a set time. You couldn't take a right turn on the red. And then they switched it and they put the light or the illuminated light in, which goes on and off depending on what the circumstances are, which is fine. And then they extended that lane by eliminating the parking. And then, and so, okay, that made sense to me because now we've created a little more room for people to get out of the way, the people that want to go straight or turn left. And then the notion of we're going to reduce or eliminate that right turn lane entirely, I don't understand how that's even possible. And so that was just, we're just trying to figure out what the thought process is with regard to that. So.
Can we get your name and city of residence for the record?
Pardon me?
Can we get your name and city of residence for the record?
Yeah, my name is Doug Edge, Kenmore.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mayor, I have no more individuals signed up for onsite public comment. Can we move on to virtual?
Yes.
If you're virtual and would like to give public comment at this time, please use the raise hand function. I currently have 4 hands raised for virtual public comment, and we'll take them in this order. Victoria Grayland, followed by Claire Alexander Joy. Leslie, please provide your full name for the record. And then Brianna and Tony Enslow. If one or both of you is speaking, please clarify during your public comment. Victoria, go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. On behalf of the people of Kenmore, we acknowledge that we occupy the traditional ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Duwamish tribe, a people that are still here, continuing to honor and bring to light their ancient heritage. Without them, we would not have access to this gathering, dialogue, and learning space. We ask that we take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers of this land who are still here. Also, I would like to do a labor acknowledgement in honor of Dr. King, who was so cruelly taken from us all 55 years ago. We also pause to recognize and acknowledge the labor that created the United States and from which we all benefit. We remember that our nation is built on the labor of enslaved people who were forcibly brought to the U.S. from the African continent, and we recognize the continued contribution of their survivors. I remember when Dr. King was taken, my high school shut down for a couple of days. When it reopened, Fred Hampton was on the loudspeaker. He had graduated from my high school the year before, along with my brother and John Prine, this famous songwriter. And I remember he told us, get a good education and save the world. So I will never forget that, and I tried to honor that. About 2 years ago, the City Council started a land acknowledgement to acknowledge our connection to local Native tribes and how their land was taken without any compensation. Recently, King Rob has decided to stop that land acknowledgement with some odd explanation about the land acknowledgement request not coming from a recognized tribe. But I've never heard any enrolled member of a federally recognized tribe demanding that any body reject its land acknowledgement on those terms. Land acknowledgements are generally accepted as sincere and true, and they need to come from non-native people, the settlers, the ones who took the land. I'd like to know why we haven't heard a peep about this from the City Council members. In conclusion, happy holidays to all, and 2 words to the good people of King County. Stanley Cup. Thank you.
Claire Alexander Joy.
Hi, yes, my name is Claire Alexander Jolie. I live with my wife in Kenmore. I am here to address the proposed, the possible removal, I should say, of the right turn lane on 170th. My wife and I live literally right there, right next to the Fortune Inn. We are at the Waterford condominium. That's right across the street from the park. And we've been here for 3 years. One thing that we have observed pretty much every day, and that will echo what has been said by at least one other person, is that there is most of the traffic comes from 100th going downhill towards the bridge, and most people turn right. Okay, most cars line up literally to turn right as opposed to turning left. So of course, the concern that I share with others is that if we were to remove the lane, that we would have even more backing up of traffic. And then related to this, of course, for us in particular and other residents that live at the Waterford or behind us, because there are new condominiums, as you know, and there are quite a few of them. The concern is that when we, for example, when I come back from work, I am, coming downhill, therefore going towards the bridge. The only way that I can enter my property is by literally crossing the yellow line, I hate to say, to enter a parking lot. There is no other way to enter. Currently, the cars that come from behind, that are behind me, can go around me, okay, to make their way to the bridge because there is a second lane. in the absence of such a lane, that would no longer be possible. And therefore, the traffic would back up considerably. And what happens typically, especially in the evening, is that I have to wait before I can make the left turn into my property, because there are a lot of cars coming from the bridge and making a left turn onto 170th. And so I have to sit there for a while, which is perfectly okay. I have the patience to do that. The problem is that in the absence of this right turn lane, now I would be literally blocking traffic. And I hate to say, but sometimes people get quite upset because you're blocking their way because they want to go home. And so, the idea of blocking traffic and possibly having all these people getting really impatient with you and sometimes quite upset, people honk, people flash their lights, is not terribly appealing. So my wife and I, while we generally support bike lanes, in this instance, are not particularly in favor of the possible removal of the right turn lane. Thank you, and I will stop right here.
Leslie, please provide your full name for the record.
Leslie McCallum, the unceded lands and waters of the Sammamish, 98028. I'm concerned about the City Council's unanimous passing of a resolution in support of King County's Crisis Care Centers levy. Coercion is not care. As mentioned in the presentation at the meeting on March 13th, Crisis Care Centers would not be designated exclusively for involuntary treatment, but that they, quote, ought to be able to provide an involuntary location, unquote, and the crisis care centers can be, quote, transitory in nature to evaluation and treatment centers.
I apologize, Ms. McCallum, our city attorney has her hand up, and usually when she does this, she has a good reason. So, Dawn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I truly apologize to the speaker for interrupting. Unfortunately, state law prohibits the city from using public facilities to oppose or support a ballot measure unless very specific procedural steps are taken. Those procedural steps were taken and noticed and sent out when the matter was discussed in the last meeting, but we don't have those procedures in place tonight, so we can't discuss the ballot measure because that would be in violation of state law. I'm very sorry. If the speaker wants to speak on another topic, that would be very appropriate, but again, we can't speak to a pending ballot measure.
No worries, sorry. I'll just say I'm also concerned as to why the city is courting further jet fuel and noise pollution with a hydroplane competition. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brianna and Tony Enslow. Before you begin, are both individuals speaking or just one?
Oh, no, it's just Tony. Sorry, we weren't sure what to put, but we're both here anyway.
No worries. Go ahead.
All right. Well, hello. My name is Tony Enslow. I live in Kenmore, Washington. I'm talking about the bike lane. And actually, thank you for sending out the leaflet. I wouldn't have known about this without that. So I think that's pretty cool. So anyway, I can chime in. Anyway, I bike to work every day from 72nd Avenue. And on the face of it, I mean, it sounds kind of cool to have a bike lane, being a person that would be in the bike lane and use it. But I'm not sure that I would feel comfortable even being in a bike lane or being stopped at that stoplight where the bike lane would have me be, just because Leslie or Claire. Claire had a lot of really good points. People get pretty worked up at the intersection. They drive really fast, and I would just feel really exposed having traffic go on the left of me, on the right of me, and turning in front of me. Right now, I know it's not the best thing to do, but even before I get to that intersection, I actually get up on the sidewalk and I make sure nobody's there because I'd like to try to be polite. And I actually take the sidewalk through that intersection instead of being in the bike lane. I get back on the Burke-Gilman ride as soon as I can, but as long as there are no people there, I'll do that. And I just don't think I use the bike lane how it's proposed. But I agree there is a problem, it would be really cool if it was safer there for bikes, but I don't know if this gets us there. And that's everything. Thank you.
Mayor, I have no more individuals signed up for virtual public comment.
All right. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The consent agenda stands approved. Next on the agenda is the business agenda. First item is the Veterans Memorial Proposal for City Hall presented by Acting City Manager Stephanie Lukash, Community Development Director Debbie Bent, and Public Works Operations Director Jennifer Gordon.
Good evening, Council. So this evening we are looking for Council direction on a proposed Veterans Memorial located here at City Hall. Over the last couple of years, there have been two groups of veterans, one called the Veterans Tribute for Kenmore, led by Stacey Valenzuela, and the other led by the Kenmore Historical Society, represented by Suzanne Greathouse. So given the interest of the two groups, staff asked both groups to submit a proposal. The proposal criteria is an agenda attachment. So you can see what we asked the two groups to submit, along with the evaluation criteria. So as a staff group of four, myself, Stephanie Lukash, Jennifer Gordon, and also Jeff Durant, who is a Kenmore police officer, but also a former veteran. We reviewed the two proposals and we reached a unanimous conclusion that the proposals submitted by the Kenmore Historical Society met the evaluation criteria. Both proposals did involve the veterans groups, and so that was one of the key criteria. So if council has any specific questions about the proposals, the criteria, or the staff recommendation, we are here to answer them.
Questions? Any questions? Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you for involving both those community groups. Obviously, their contributions are very important and appreciated. In short, what was the summary for the pro for the bench proposal?
Excuse me, it was the
idea was that the bench proposal was the one that was preferred.
why was that? We carefully reviewed the criteria and we felt that the bench proposal met that criteria. And we also felt that that proposal submitted the detail to allow us to reach that conclusion.
Any other questions? No, if I don't see any questions, I'm going to start tossing out motions. My understanding is there's three motions that you're asking for here.
Correct.
Okay. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the Veterans Memorial proposal submitted by the Kenmore Historical Society.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to approve the Veterans Memorial proposal submitted by the Kenmore Historical Society, seconded by Councilmember Shrubnik, Deputy Mayor O'Kane?
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall?
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler?
Yes.
Councilmember File?
Given had seen a lot of previous communications, I don't feel like I can be neutral in my vote. And so I'm going to stay neutral at this point.
You're going to abstain?
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 6 votes, or so with 6 yeses, 0 nos, and 1 abstain, the motion passes.
All right, the chair will entertain a motion authorizing the city manager to execute any necessary agreements with the Kenmore Historical Society.
So moved.
Seconded.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion authorizing the city manager to execute any necessary agreements with the Kenmore Historical Society, seconded by Councilmember File, Councilmember Baker.
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 7 yeses and 0 nos, the motion passes.
The chair will entertain a motion to authorize up to $4,000 of city funds if needed as matching funds for memorial expenditures such as design, fabrication, and installation.
So moved.
I'll second. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion authorizing up to $4,000 of city funds if needed as matching funds for memorial expenditures such as design, fabrications, and installations, seconded by Mayor Herbig, Councilmember Baker.
Aye.
Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
With 7 yeses and 0 nos, the motion passes.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda, facility alternatives for westbound 170th Street between Juanita Drive, 68th Avenue, and 72nd Avenue, presented by Engineering Director John Vicente and Traffic Engineer Tobin Bennett Gold.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. We're here to talk to you tonight about some proposals we want to for 170th Street between 72nd Avenue and 68th Juanita Drive, and to also get council direction on whether we should consider looking at some pedestrian facilities along the north side of 170th from 72nd to the park. With that, I'm going to have Tobin give you, hold on, he's going to give a presentation on the alternatives. Just having a little technical issue here. Give us a moment. No, that's what they should be. That's what they're saying. Oh,
Snap my finger.
we're going to improvise here. Tobin's not an improviser, but he'll do well, I'm sure.
I want to thank everybody in the audience for their patience while we get this figured out. Let's make sure we get that microphone.
Tobin, will you turn your mic on? It's not on.
Not on.
Good news is I'm running out of things to do wrong. Should have made a simpler presentation if we're going to do it this way. Okay, so we have a few things to cover, like John was saying, and I'm going to try to strike a good compromise between clarity and brevity. The first thing I want to talk about is stopping site distance, which is necessary context for our second item, which is discussion about the parking on 170th Street, which then will segue into a discussion about what we do with that pavement if we're not parking on it. And then I'll turn it over to John for discussion of pedestrian facilities on the north side. So stopping site distance is not a mathy concept, it's more of a geometric concept, and it takes a little bit of explaining. In terms of stopping site distance, distance, thank you, refers to how far an oncoming vehicle travels. Site means I'm going to start measuring at the furthest point out that I can see if I'm the one entering traffic. And stopping means I want to make sure that the car can stop in that distance that we measured. Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm so much more comfortable with this space bar. Okay. So stopping site distance is essentially asking if I want to turn into traffic and the way looks clear, is there a vehicle I can't see that's about to hit me? I'm not going to bury the lead here. We are talking about 170th Street and the boat trailers parked there or previously parked there. But we're also talking about all of Kenmore. If we allow parking or other visual obstructions in places where it blocks the sight lines for drivers entering traffic, folks can have a car crash even when everyone involved is following the rules and doing everything right. That's a failure to engineer a safe driving environment. This is not just engineering philosophy. This is something that does cause crashes in Kenmore and will lead to more crashes if not corrected. It's caused crashes on 73rd Avenue and we've corrected it. It's caused crashes on 181st Street and we've corrected it. It's caused crashes on 60th Avenue just north of City Hall where we are, and we've corrected it. And it may have led to more crashes in numerous other locations if we had not corrected it proactively when we became aware of the safety deficiency. It has also caused crashes on 170th Street, and last fall we corrected it there too. Whether or not parking on 170th Street should be preserved has been a topic of discussion for over a decade, and I want to explain why we cannot have parking here and still meet our minimum standards for safety. Myself up. Okay, there we go. Okay, what we have here is a diagram showing a driver entering traffic from a driveway. Maybe it's a private driveway, or maybe it's the Rhododendron Park driveway, or someplace like it. The driver is waiting for a gap so they can enter traffic. There are a few vehicles on the street which are parked legally. And there's another driver approaching, traveling at the speed limit and not a smidge faster. Everyone here is following the rules, and there ought to be no reason a crash would occur. The driver entering traffic, their sight line is limited by the nearest parked vehicle. And this limits how far down the road they can see. In this case, it appears to the driver entering traffic that the way is clear. There's an oncoming vehicle, but the driver entering traffic can't see it. So then the driver goes ahead and enters traffic, hoping they found an adequate gap. The unseen approaching vehicle, however, is much too close and traveling too fast to avoid a crash. Compared to a fast approaching vehicle, a car entering traffic is as good as stopped. Making a turn and getting up to speed can take 7 seconds or more, and most of that time you're not even pointed in the right direction. Everything happens very quickly, and once you pull out, there's not much you can do to react a vehicle that you didn't know was there. When an unexpected traffic event happens, like a car pulling out in front of you, it takes roughly 2.5 seconds to observe, understand, decide, and act to avoid the crash. During that 2.5 seconds, the approaching driver, who was traveling at 35 miles per hour, the speed limit, has already covered 130 feet of ground. The oncoming vehicle started out 200 feet away, and they are now less than 70 feet away before they even begin to apply the brakes. If you are the driver entering traffic, this is about the soonest that you might realize you're about to be hit. The best case scenario is that you'll keep going and get a little bit further down the road, but realistically, what a lot of people do is they panic and they hit the brakes. We do our math assuming that the entering vehicle has come to a complete stop, because often that is the case. Once the oncoming driver hits the brakes, the vehicle traveling 35 miles per hour takes another 120 feet to come to a full stop. Unfortunately, the driver entering traffic is still taking up some space in that 120 feet of pavement, and a crash occurred. All this happened in the space of less than 6 seconds, but it felt like even faster because we spent nearly half that time realizing what was happening. So to recap, a crash occurred. The driver entering traffic waited for what looked like a gap. The oncoming driver was going the speed limit, and the cars blocking the sightlines were legally parked. No one did anything wrong, but a crash still happened. What caused this crash was a failure to engineer a safe traffic environment. We did not create a traffic environment that people were able to use safely, even when everyone was doing exactly what we told them to do. As the person whose job it is to engineer a safe traffic environment, this makes me very uncomfortable, to say the least. So if it is the situation that we have, that we do want to engineer a safe traffic environment, and if closing the driveways is off the table, we have basically two options. One great option is reducing the travel speed. This means that the oncoming driver doesn't travel as far during the reaction time and requires a shorter distance to come to a complete stop. Lower speeds mean you can have more street parking or accommodate other sightline obstructions without creating this condition where you have an unseen vehicle that can still be too close to stop before they hit you. In this diagram here, reducing the speed of the oncoming driver to 25 miles per hour means that the entire reaction and stopping distance during that time, they are visible to the driver entering traffic. To put that another way, if you can't see the car coming towards you, then that car is far enough away that they can stop before you pull into traffic. Now, it's not always the case that we can slow down traffic so that less sight distance is required. On streets with higher operating speeds where it's not feasible or not desirable to reduce travel speeds substantially, we have to protect the sight lines that let the driver see traffic when it's further away. If we have to accommodate sight lines to see higher speed traffic when it's further away, that means keeping a larger area clear near the intersection and driveways. What this often means is that on higher speed roads, we have to push back the extent of legal parking to be further away from the driveways and intersections than we would have to do on lower speed roads. These diagrams have been showing the sight distance triangles for making a right turn, where the only vehicles you have to worry about are coming from your left. But unless we have a left turn prohibition, we have to make sure the same principles apply to checking for vehicles coming from the right. This means we have to protect sightlines on both sides of driveways and side streets and keep a larger triangle free of sightline obstructions. The last complication is when driveways are spaced closely together. With one driveway, we could provide parking in this diagram, but because the sight distance triangles from the nearby driveway can overlap with each other, parked cars that avoid sight lines of one driveway are now obstructing sight lines for the next. This makes it very difficult to safely provide parking on roads with higher speed limits and frequent driveways, and this is why our higher speed roads in our standard cross-section does not include street parking. Allowing street parking when it blocks sight lines for nearby driveways and side streets is a failure to engineer a safe traffic environment. Now I want to look specifically at 170th Street between Rhododendron Park and 72nd Avenue. On this section of 170th Street, the conversation on this section, this is the section of 170th Street I want to talk about. The conversation about street parking has been ongoing for over a decade, and the concerns about sight distance have been going on for at least as long. 170th Street has driveways and side streets at these locations marked in red. The two furthest west are maintenance and public access roads to Rhododendron Park, respectively, and the eastmost is 72nd Street itself. All of the intermediate driveways serve private residences. The speed limit on this section of 170th Street is 35 miles per hour. Travel speeds are a bit higher than that, but our goal is to get the speeds down and eventually be able to reduce the speed limit to 30 miles per hour. For vehicles traveling at the current speed limit, it takes an oncoming vehicle about 250 feet to observe, react, brake, and come to a complete stop to avoid a crash. But if we were to reduce the speed limit to 30 miles per hour, as we plan to do eventually, and if drivers are complying with that new speed limit, then a vehicle traveling at the 30 mile per hour speed limit would need roughly 200 feet to observe, react, brake, and come to a stop. This is the best possible scenario for returning parking on 170th Street. It will already be very difficult to get speeds down to 30 miles per hour, and getting them even lower than that would require a substantial redesign of the facility. So the current speed limit is 35, but because we're future-minded folk, what I'm about to show you is based on a 30 mile per hour speed limit scenario, which allows for shorter stopping distances. Under current conditions, stopping distances are actually longer than what we're going to show here. This is the driveway to Rhododendron Park. I shaded it yellow because the tree canopy obstructs view of the driveway. This is 200 feet on each approach lane, the stopping sight distance for a vehicle traveling 30 miles per hour. Faster vehicles, of course, require longer distances. This is the triangle which must be kept clear to see oncoming vehicles if those vehicles are traveling at 30 miles per hour. Faster vehicles require larger triangles. This shaded red area is the portion of the parking lane that must be kept clear. Vehicles entering the shaded red area are obstructing the view of drivers entering traffic from Rhododendron Park. These are the sight distance triangles for the Rhododendron Park maintenance entrance and for the next 3 private driveways east of Rhododendron Park. This yellow triangle right here is a little bit more than half a lane wide. If you could fit a car entirely in this yellow triangle, it would be fine, but I think the best you could do is 2 or 3 motorcycles if you're careful. Continuing eastward toward Simon's Road, these 2 driveways were on the far right of the previous slide. And here are the sight distance triangles for the next 4 residential driveways which open up onto 170th Street. This yellow triangle here doesn't obstruct anyone's line of sight, but it's only about 5 feet wide. Further east, we finally get to 72nd Avenue. The 2 driveways on the left here were the rightmost driveways in the previous slide. And this is the sight distance triangle for 72nd Avenue. This yellow triangle here is 6 feet wide and is currently striped as a bike lane. Of all these sight distance triangles, I want to remind you, they are for vehicles traveling 30 miles per hour. Cars on 170th Street today are traveling much faster and the speed limit is higher. Faster vehicles require even larger triangles to be kept free of obstructions. We cannot safely have street parking on 170th Street. I cannot belabor this point enough. Higher speed roads with frequent driveways, we can't have street parking and still maintain our very minimum standards for safety. This is why the cross section in our standards do not have street parking for our arterial roads. And this is why the parking was removed from 170th Street last year, making it consistent with our standard cross section for that roadway segment. So if we have the extra paved width and we can't use it for parking, what's the best use we can get out of that asphalt? When we removed parking from 170th Street last year, what we did was take the existing right turn lane extension, which was limited to travel from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., and we made it a right turn lane extension for all day long. The reason we did this was because it allowed us to remove the parking without introducing any operational changes to the road. At that time, we weren't willing to remove the right turn lane without doing more work to figure out what the impact would be. In other words, it was the smallest change we could make and make the road safer. The right turn lane was installed in 2016. Because traffic used to back up all the way across the bridge, folks waiting to turn right onto the bridge would also suffer a substantial backup all the way up 170th Street towards Simon's Road. This right turn lane allowed folks going straight or left at the intersection to not get stuck behind right turners. As part of the West Sammamish Bridge project, we added a lot of storage up closer to Bothell Way, and in the months since construction impacts from the bridge have faded away, we see virtually no backups across the bridge anymore. Which means folks turning right onto the bridge are essentially free-flowing. Some queuing still occurs on red lights when right turners must find a break in the traffic to turn right on red. but congestion on the bridge is no longer cascading past the 170th Street and Juanita Drive signal. Because monstrous queues cascading over the bridge and down Juanita Drive and down 170th Street are no longer the norm, there is no longer the same benefit of having the right turn lane extension for storing all those right turners and separating out folks going straight and left. Traffic should still be separated near the intersection with normal sized turn lanes, but providing a way for folks to jump the queue 1,000 feet in advance just isn't needed anymore. So if we can't use the paved area to park vehicles, and if we don't need it to store right turners, I think we have an opportunity here for the city to leverage its investment in multimodal infrastructure by repurposing this area as a buffered bike lane. In 2016, bike lanes were installed all the way from Inglemore High at 155th Street, up Simons Road and 170th Street, stopping at 72nd Avenue. In 2020, we were able to expand those facilities south of Inglemore High, along Simons Road and city limits at 92nd, along Simons Road to city limits at 92nd Avenue. And over the past 2 or 3 years, you may have noticed some construction on Juanita Drive and 68th Corridor, installing new bike lanes on 68th Avenue and Juanita Drive, and new shared use path across the bridge, expanding Kenmore's bicycle facility network and improving access to the greater regional network. Adding this last 1,000 feet of bike lane right here is all we need to connect our Simons Road facilities to our greater city and regional bicycle network, leveraging the tremendous investments we've already made by making access to the greater network safer and more comfortable for a wider population of cyclists traveling on Simons Road and 170th Street to reach destinations as nearby as Rhododendron Park and as far away as the Burke-Gilman Trail can take you. We have 2 preferred alternatives for making this connection, and I can show you that right now. They have different benefits and compromises. Both alternatives provide a bike lane along the north curb of 170th Street and differ only in the intersection treatment. Alternative A provides a bike box at the intersection. A bike box allows cyclists to get out in front of drivers, remain highly visible, and clear the intersection without conflicts with the drivers behind them. For many intersections, this would be the preferred method for bringing cyclists into the intersection, and cyclists would see the greatest benefit here from a bike box treatment. However, the specific nature of this intersection is that the right turn volumes are very heavy. Over 90% of westbound drivers on 170th Street make a right turn here. And bike boxes, unfortunately, work only if we implement a no right on red at this intersection, including prohibiting right on red during the southbound left turn phase, where you have the concentric southbound left turns and westbound to northbound right turns turning inside each other. Now, this intersection is no stranger to right on red prohibitions. We have had no right on red at this we have a no right on red sign at this intersection right now. Granted, we've set it up to only turn on when the backup hits the bridge all the way across the bridge and comes close to 170th. But what I'm saying is that this is something that we've done here before. With full-time right turn on red prohibition, we'd expect the queue would usually reach roughly 400 feet with some reliability, which would store about, you're looking at 8 to 10 vehicles right there as a pretty reliable queue during rush hour. Our second alternative is installing a bike lane while also retaining right on red capacity. This provides for a longer separated right turn queue and also depletes that queue more quickly. I skipped a little information. The way we have to do this, the way we do this is to have the right turn traffic, and I'm talking about alternative B, backspace. There we go. Okay. The way we have to do this is have the right turn traffic cross the bike lane early so that drivers are engaging in only one complex task at a time, looking for cyclists or making a turn. This alternative would be the most similar in operation to what drivers experience right now, and it would make the most use of the congestion relief that we built into the bridge project and could be done without requiring changes to signal phasing. This is a good option, and even if a bike box has certain benefits that aren't reflected in this alternative, this approach still offers a large safety and comfort improvement for cyclists and is the least disruptive to other intersection operations. The right turn lane extension is in place already and is consistent with our standard cross-section for this segment of 170th Street and meets our minimum standards for safety. Providing a bike lane would leverage our existing investment in our multimodal network by connecting Simons Road facilities to the wider network. If council provides direction on retaining the existing conditions or installing bike lane at this location using one of the alternatives presented here or looking into other alternatives, we could complete that work during the pavement marking season this summer. Providing a bike lane would also offer a buffer against traffic for pedestrians walking along the north side of 170th Street, which is the last topic we want to discuss tonight. I'm going to hand it over to John to discuss the considerations for pedestrian facilities on this same segment of 170th Street.
Yeah, before we actually get into that, I did want to also point out that we are proposing to extend the bike lane from 72nd, or have a continuous bike lane from Juanita to 72nd on the eastbound side as part of another our striping project this spring. So that would give us bike lanes going both directions with this proposal. But actually, before we get into the sidewalk, I just want to see if council has any questions regarding the treatments to 170th.
Deputy Mayor.
Sorry about the mute. I actually, how do I say that? I have some concerns about this. As much as I really like the idea of having a continuous bike lane, alternative B feels dangerous to me because of the overlap. I think that feels very dangerous as a driver or a biker. I can see, I'm wondering, is there a way to do this without the bike box? And given the concerns about the bikes wheeling past on the Inglewood side, is there a potential that we could do something without the bike box and on both sides of the intersection where we actually have a light that is bikes have to stop? I know we passed an ordinance for, red stop signs bikes can go through, but I feel like a red light for bikes for their safety to allow for the flow of traffic would be a benefit. But I definitely don't like the bike box and I don't like the crossover. I don't feel safe about that. I also think, I could see how the fit and the queue would be okay with the new mapping with the bike lane. But I also could see how our community would be very concerned about losing that right lane all the way down to the right onto 68th. So my first instinct looking at this was I only liked existing conditions, but the more I think about it, I'm wondering, is there a way to put like a red light for bikes for their safety to make the bike lane staying in the right-hand lane like alternative A all the way down? Would there be any potential of doing something like that?
So the problem that both of these alternatives, and both of these come from NACTO-supported treatments, the problem that these two designs are trying to solve is the conflict between cyclists and right turners. If the bike lane runs up along the side and does not have a bike box, then when you have a green light, you have cyclists going forward and you also have a green light for people turning right, which is fundamentally why the right turn conflict has to be moved ahead of the intersection so that we separate the complexity for drivers. Are they looking for bikes or are they looking for an opportunity to turn or are they following the signal? So having that separation up there is a solution that I think has begun to be adopted in the past decade, having it cross up there, and it's been implemented regionally with a great deal of success. It does look strange, but we have that bright green pavement alerting drivers that they are crossing a lane that is not theirs. They are doing that at a time when they are not invested in intersection concerns, so they can focus on the transition from one side to the bike lane or another. It is requiring that those right turn people, that the right turn drivers are making a crossing movement of the bike lane. So they are not continuing in a straight path. So they are having to make an intentional movement across that bike lane. And that's one of the key criteria for doing that early crossing as well.
I really appreciate your thoughtful presentation and explanation. I also think about a large portion of the drivers on this road being high school students, young drivers, new drivers. And I just I recognize the importance of bike safety. I really want contiguous bike lanes up and over Simon's Road. But for me at this time, I just have to share, I feel more comfortable with existing conditions. But I really appreciate your presentation of this, and I understand the good intentions for this bike lane. Thank you.
Councilmember Marshall?
Thank you. Is there any thought to having bicyclists stay on the right, and then when they approach the intersection where there is a sidewalk, dismounting their bicycles and walking them through the crosswalk? We did that for some decades, and I really, I like to see bikes integrated in traffic where it may be safe, but I just culturally, I can't really conceive of intermixing bicycles too much into mainstream traffic. I don't think the society is going to adjust to it anytime soon. And I don't see why bicyclists can't dismount and take an additional 5 seconds to cross the crosswalk.
Well, I think it would constitute a little more delay than 5 seconds dismounting. I think also if we had the expectation that they dismount, we would see a great many cyclists choose not to and choose to enter traffic. And if we have cyclists entering traffic, if they are very, if they're cyclists that are, have a high level of ability and very comfortable mixing with vehicles, that can be a very safe option with them. If we have a facility that doesn't feel accessible to people who aren't at that high level of ability, fewer people will choose to bike altogether. When we have a facility that encourages more people to bike, and when we can make that facility safe, then we also get additional compounding safety from safety in numbers, from normalizing the appearance of cyclists, from people becoming more familiar with mixing traffic and using these facilities. So I would say the expectation of having the cyclist dismount is most consistent with our existing conditions right now, where those cyclists with the ability and comfort to mix with traffic would merge into the through lane, or they would get onto the sidewalk. I think that's what's happening right now. And I think that's what would be consistent with what you're expressing.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes. I've got a few questions here. You are effectively reducing this down to, from the service driveway, if my understanding is correct, from the service driveway to Rhododendron Park to 68th or Juanita Drive. What are you going to do with the traffic that backs up that wants to turn left or go straight? I mean, how are you going to handle that? It seems like we're causing a bigger problem.
Would you like me to answer that one right now? I don't want to interrupt you.
No, that one's a good one to start with.
Okay, great. Yes, so what we anticipate from the traffic data that we're looking at right now is that folks being delayed by being mixed up in that right turn traffic is really only a concern for about 90 minutes a day. During that 90 minutes, folks who are going straight or turning left, we see them arrive at a rate of about 1 every 2 minutes or so, making up roughly 5 or 6% of the total traffic on this road. Some of these alternatives, and depending on which one we pick, they do increase the delay for those folks by roughly 30 seconds per vehicle that arrives during that 90 minutes. So we are looking at a delay for those drivers that comes up to somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes cumulative across all the drivers for the day that are going through or making a left turn. So I do acknowledge that some of these alternatives will mix people up in that right turn queue and will increase the delay for some of those people. And that would be an impact that these changes have. And I want to say, oh, sorry, I want to say those are rough numbers. To get more precise numbers requires a lot more work that we can do, but yeah.
So you got to figure out how to ask you a question and not cause you any consternation. But how often do you drive this road?
I probably drive this road, I mean, to be honest, mostly during working hours and not very often during rush hour, but I would say several times a month.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to drive this road, and I know many others that tend to drive it several times a day. Okay, now here's the tough question. Do you live in Kenmore?
No, I live just a few minutes north of Kenmore.
Okay. To really understand the complexities of this intersection, and trust me, there are a number of complexities. You really need to experience it regularly during rush hour and throughout the day to really see what can happen. There is lots of traffic that is now using 170th as a shortcut over to 522. There is, depending upon the traffic on the bridge or on 405, we get increased amounts of traffic on 170th. And all you got to do is live there, especially between 4 or 3:30 and 5 o'clock. You got to remember the high school is also putting out a lot of traffic onto that intersection there at 68th and 170th. So there's lots of intricacies with it. So I really hope you don't jump to conclusions with this.
Oh, no, I agree completely. I think this is the single most complicated intersection we have in the city.
Okay. And I think you guys have got something else you want to talk about? A potential sidewalk?
Yes, we can move on to the sidewalk. If
We're not quite there yet, so.
And that's fine. But what I want to just be sure of is that you really look at reducing a 2-lane to 1-lane. Something has to be done with the speed going down that curb lane. And I think we're all in agreement on that. But we also have to consider movement of the traffic, but not at the expense of any danger to any pedestrians. Because I have seen myself many times where somebody with a baby stroller has had to get off of the right-of-way there, where the dirt right-of-way, and get onto the street with traffic flying by them. So there's lots of issues, and that really needs to be fixed. So anyway, that's all I have for now.
Councilmember Shedneck.
Thanks for this presentation. It was actually really helpful and clear, even though it was a little long. I actually have the same reaction that Deputy Mayor O'Kane had, and the same thought entered my mind, and I actually didn't hear a response to her question. And what I mean by the same reaction is I wasn't a fan of either A or B, and I also thought of the jump queue light. And so I'd like to hear an answer to that. And then I have a clarifying question. Well, and an answer to the question of, is it feasible to do something like that as a third alternative? Because I don't like either of these, I don't think. And my clarifying question is, what direction are the bikes supposed to go? Are they going across Juanita there, or are they turning right? Because the bike box idea looks like they're doing both, and then option B looks like it's going with the through straight across lane. So that's my clarifying question.
So let me answer your last question, and then I'm going to ask you
Yeah.
to repeat your first one if that's
Okay.
okay. Because if I didn't answer the
Yeah.
deputy mayor's question, it might have been that I missed it. So what are the bikes supposed to do? We expect very few cyclists to want to turn right here because we've provided that multi-use path on the
Yeah,
other side of the
right.
bridge.
Okay.
So what they would be doing here is they would be making basically a through movement,
Right.
targeting the green crosswalk on the other side of the street, essentially.
Okay.
And then they would either turn north or they would then
Yeah.
cross there again. Or if they were comfortable turning with left turn traffic, they would make a left turn there.
Right.
But we expect
Okay.
very few cyclists.
Straight
to
or
turn
left,
right.
straight or left. And I actually concur with Councilmember Marshall then. If it's crossing in a sidewalk, they're supposed to dismount, correct? I mean, isn't that the law?
If they are using the crosswalk on the north leg to cross, I'm going to say I'm familiar with the Arizona law on this, and I haven't checked if it's the Washington law too.
Okay, I thought it was the law. So anyway, that's something that we need clarification on. And then and clarifying the original question that both Deputy Mayor O'Kane and I had, is there an option, a third option for having a separate light that, sort of like they have separate lights for buses, right? That jump the queue. So this would be the same idea, but for bikes. So the bike could jump the queue, go straight, allowing the car traffic to come in behind them once they've already crossed.
So that's very close to what the function of the bike box is. The cyclists would take the bike lane to position themselves in front of traffic. And then when they have the green light, they are first in line to go and clear the intersection as the cars are only just entering it.
Okay, I get that it's the same function, but does it, well, I guess I'm not so sure that it actually functions like that. And I guess my concern about the safety issue stems from the, several commentators that said our existing condition isn't even safe for bikes. So unless we're, really speaking to bicyclists and, vetting these kind of solutions, including our existing condition, it just, on the face of it, it doesn't seem safe. I mean, certainly the one that crosses the bike lane, I mean, I've been in those several times on a bike and they're terrifying. So I don't know. I'm not a fan.
Councilmember File?
Thank you, Mayor. I am also in agreement with many of my colleagues, but let's just take these a little bit one at a time. Current conditions have some risk. Obviously, the alternate A bike box, I have to want to like it. I certainly don't like the last example. When we're thinking about the use of this road, the sidewalks, and how people handle and interact with the conditions of the street, I think about those who frequently use it, who also live by it and frequently travel through it. I think about the seniors visiting our senior center and reactivity. I think about the line of sight. I think about our student youth who are traveling as new drivers to the high school. And over my 32 years of living in Kenmore, I have seen numerous accidents, many young teens in the mornings and the later afternoons at this intersection here. So when we think about how we're going to adapt, one of the questions I have to ask is, why aren't we really considering alternatives like the East Side has with bikes? They don't necessarily merge the bike pathway on the road, but on the opposite side of the sidewalk. So you're having a bike protected pathway. You see this through Redmond. You see it through Bellevue, and there's some real good, safe outcomes for that, good science. I'm more fond of that type of approach than putting bikes on the road. And as someone who often used to bike, that last alternative scares me. Additionally, I think about how our seniors are accessing the senior center, whether they're walking or visiting for services, food services, and leaving with toted carts. I think about the families who are walking and accessing the area and trying to navigate, and line of sight is not necessarily the best. So even the idea of altogether dropping a right-hand turn does not seem great or the best for our community, especially with how traffic congestion follows within our region, and how long it takes to get around the area if you're not able to get off that road with a right-hand turn. Additionally, I see our chief is here, and I have questions for him regarding past accidents, recent accidents, the average age of those who get into a fender bender at the intersection of 68th and Juanita Drive and 72nd Avenue. This matters as we are adapting. So I have to say again, I'm just not very fond of these recommendations or changes. I rather see healthier, safer, alternative approaches similar to Redmond and Bellevue for bikeability pathways, off the road, yet protected and safe. I really believe in improving health and life outcomes for our community. And I know we can get there, but we don't have to necessarily take every cookie cutter example and put throughout our community. We can be adaptive with our community. So what would it take to be a little bit more adaptive and to do it a alternate bike pathline approach? And for our chief, since he's available and can definitely give some comment, I want to know about the average ages of the persons who are getting into accidents on this road, times of day, and ped bike accidents as well. And not later, but during this discussion. Thank you. Thank you, Chief.
So I am a big fan of separate bike facilities. I really love what we've done with the multi-use path on the bridge. The constraint for providing that everywhere we'd like to do it is just space. You know, the places where we would put those separated bike paths, they are people's front yards, they're rhododendron park, they're people's driveways, they're the spaces that aren't already taken up are the roads that we've built. And often the most practical way that we can provide bike facilities is by taking some of that asphalt that's there and giving it to another mode. And so that's what this bike lane does. Now, in terms of providing buffers, there's different ways we can provide buffers. You know, it can be just paint, it can be all the way up to flexible delineators, it can be RPMs. We have lots of tools for separating that paved area, but building something that's completely off of the paved area is a really difficult thing to do in an area that's infilled so much as what we have right now. It's also something that's much easier to implement when we're doing a large project like Juanita Drive, where we're tearing up everything and we can rebuild it however we want. When we're retrofitting and implementing improvements on existing facilities, our toolbox is much smaller. So I do absolutely love separating cyclists from traffic. It's a matter of practicality that we're really restricted the areas that are already disturbed.
And just one layered question on that. The right-of-way space is rather limited. So you're saying that right-of-way space is not wide enough, and the complexity of working and navigating that process would be maybe too time consuming or costly in staff and design time, or because I'm thinking mostly about our community and how they access this corridor, not necessarily about the other.
I think it would be very expensive in a lot of dimensions, design time, construction cost, right-of-way acquisition, if that was a factor. Investing in that would allow us to do less of other things as well. So trying to provide the most for the money that's available to us means we won't be able to put our perfect facility everywhere we want it to have. I mean, I would really, as a cyclist myself, there's a lot of roads where I'd like to not be on the road, but also as a cyclist myself, I really appreciate it when that space is carved out for me, when I'm made more visible by the facilities that we put on there, given the necessary factor that I am going to be sharing that asphalt with motor vehicles.
I appreciate that. And I do want to just to be clear, I do support the reduction of speed. I would support also some turtles on this road, just because going off of a hill, especially with young drivers, it can help. So Chief.
So I'm sure Tobin has studied the collisions in this area far more than I have. So I'm speaking very anecdotally about my knowledge of this area. The collisions that I recall, which there have not been a ton in 2022 recently, but the ones I recall have been more, I would describe as commuter based. The rush hour, people, as everyone has been discussing tonight, cutting through Simons or Juanita and using Kenmore as a cut through to get to 522. So that tends to be the ones that I recall off the top of my head. I cannot speak to the age of those drivers, but generally that's what comes to mind when I think of the collisions there. That said, statistically, there is no more dangerous driver on the road than a teenage driver, and we know that. So there is a lot of traffic that does come down Simons related to Inglemoor. So it's certainly something to keep in mind. If there was another question, I don't recall what it was.
So pet bike collisions.
So I can say in 2022, just because I've been recently compiling the data for the police services report that you'll see here in a few weeks, there was only one collision, bicycle collision or pedestrian collision in this stretch of roadway on 170th. And I would say was not related to anything that we discussed tonight. It was in the other direction and involved a parked vehicle. So in 2022, there were none related to this particular issue, this right turn lane.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, but I wouldn't want to compare 2022 to our current or future model thinking, given that was a height of a pandemic. I think that's fair to say for our community also listening at home, right?
Sure. And I just mentioned 2022 because that's what I happened to have looked at here recently, so I had it on top of mind. Tobin may have.
Right. Unfortunately, our crash data does lag. We can have individual crash reports, which sometimes rise to the top if they're especially severe or notable for another reason. But generally, if we're looking at the aggregated crash data, many of those crashes take a while to go through the reporting system, to go from the sheriffs to WashDOT back to me. And that's what we have the most information of once it comes to us from WashDOT. So I am familiar with the crash that Brandon was talking, that Chief Moen was talking about. It is the only bicycle crash that's happened on this short segment of 170th. I don't recall there being pedestrian crashes in this segment either. We've had about 25 crashes on this segment in the past 10 years. And I think roughly 5 of them were potentially related to sight distance issues, though it's not something that is recorded in the police report. I think another 3 or 4 of them were related to courtesy gap crashes, where you leave a gap for someone to pull out of their driveway, which is another type of sight distance issue, but one that can happen even with queued vehicles instead of parked vehicles. And then the vast preponderance of them are rear end crashes approaching the signal.
Okay, and then pedestrians who have been hit by cars, of course, and crosswalks in the area. Further up the road from this area, but on Juanita Drive, mostly student youth or young adults, emerging adults. I can think of one that's happened in my term, a student of an educator, and why we did some improvements with putting in a school zone on this road. Also, I can think about a sitting planning commissioner, that also had that same experience and reason why he's serving now and was driven to serve. So I do very care deeply about our community. I'm just not very comfortable with what I'm seeing here. And I would want to see some deeper community engagement of the neighborhoods, as well as folks from the senior center. I think that's a very fair thing to do. This is a huge change. I just would feel far more comfortable with that.
Councilmember Kugler?
Tobin, thank you so much for this presentation. I always appreciate how much detail you go into in explaining some of the challenges. There's obviously a lot to balance in this segment of this road on Northeast 170th Street. In my mind, I think I'm definitely in the minority here, but to me, existing conditions leave no buffer for pedestrians or bicyclists and is, probably the most has the greatest safety concerns for me. And alternative B is seems to me like a really poor compromise, because I agree that these types of intersections, I feel like a lot of cyclists, risk crossing while drivers are not paying attention, or sometimes they make last minute decisions to turn from one lane to the next, and then they might cross over and hit someone. Like as a bicyclist myself, I actually really like alternative A. I feel like putting the bicyclists in front of the drivers actually forces them to pay attention. It also gives you some lead time to get out into the intersection before cars drive. I know it's unusual for our community, but I feel like as a bicyclist, it is the safest because you can signal and cars can see behind you what you plan to do. In general, I feel like when we talk about our priorities of multimodal transportation and our target zero, alternative A feels like the most aligned with that. And I feel like in general, I personally want to prioritize pedestrians and bicyclists over throughput. So the other ideas you brought up, like reducing the speed limit, I'm also definitely in favor of. I would also be in favor of what Councilmember File suggested of more community input, particularly from bicyclists. But right now, I'm leaning towards alternative A, unless there are some other alternatives similar that could address some of the concerns that that Councilmember Shrevenick or Deputy Mayor O'Kane brought up.
We don't have other alternatives to present tonight. They would be variations on alternative A and B. Primarily, I wanted to show examples of the two different ways to get cyclists to the intersection. We could definitely come back with more detail about the impacts on this and the finer details, such as signal changes that may be possible to accompany one alternative or another. But let's see. But we didn't come prepared tonight to discuss the intersection operations, just the approaches.
All right, I've got a few questions. So I know that I heard you talking before the meeting that we have cameras at that intersection. I assume that you spent quite a bit of time watching movements and how things back up there. How often is the current turn lane full nowadays?
The current turn lane clears essentially every time. So we get a queue during the red light when folks are not able to turn right on red. And then during that southbound left turn, right turners are freely able to turn right on red because it's a concentric movement. They have no conflicts there. It's the other left turners are running interference for them essentially. And then also during the green light, it free flows as well. So the queuing occurs only during the northbound green when the right turners cannot find gaps to turn red.
Okay. And how often would, I know you spoke to this a little bit, but if you could just reiterate, how often do you think the proposed smaller turn pocket would be filling up throughout the day? I think you said 90 minutes a day. It might.
For about 90 minutes a day, conditions are present where it would fill up regularly. Not every time, but yeah.
Okay. And just to clarify what we were hearing during public comment, this is not a proposal to get rid of the right turn lane. This is a proposal to shrink up the right turn lane.
And I'll take the blame for the misleading postcard.
That's okay. I mean, sorry, I'm just reading through my notes. I mean, the thing that I heard loud and clear today is that the existing conditions aren't safe. That's what I heard, and that's what I'd like to get addressed. And I think you've made some very good attempts here at how to address that. I think a bike lane there will be a heck of a lot safer than people speeding down a right turn lane for sure. I also think that it would be a little absurd for us to have spent and invested in both the Juanita improvements, the bridge improvements, and the rest of Simon's Road and not figure out how everything else connects on that last few hundred feet. So I think existing conditions is just unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. And we do need to connect the bike network from Juanita to where we have it starting past 72nd. I think, I mean, I'm comfortable with A or B. I think with B, we could encourage folks who are less comfortable riding if they wanted to jump up on the sidewalk at the maintenance entrance there. And if they want to walk there, use the crosswalk to get over to the rest of the facilities. But I also think that you need to allow folks to operate as bicyclists are allowed to operate as cars and to cross the intersection and join and either go south on Juanita or north on the bridge to the Burke Gilman. I think asking everybody to dismount there is very othering of the bicyclists and frankly undoes a lot of our work that we're trying to do to make Kenmore safer for folks who are choosing to bike or walk. So I would like to see us complete that bike lane one way or the other here. And I think we do need to figure out how this connection is made at the corner. I'm very interested to hear when you get to the presentation about sidewalks and your thoughts on pedestrian safety also in that area. Because I've knocked doors in that area and I have to say it's almost as bad as, what is that, 58th over by Lake Forest Park, where you're just like looking and running for your life. And we shouldn't have any places in the city where people, I mean, even somebody, younger and able-bodied like me has to feel like I'm taking my life in my hands to go 50 feet. So I appreciate these and I would be supportive of A or B right now. Yeah, but I appreciate all the work you put in this. It's very thoughtful. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. The longer I looked at this presentation, the more I thought about the roots of it and the importance of pedestrian and bike safety, which I agree with the mayor, as he said, the existing conditions are not providing bike safety. And Tobin, when you mentioned, and it really was, it's funny how sometimes a drawing can make a difference on how you can visualize something, but realizing that the majority of bikers are going straight through the intersection. Actually, we don't even want bikers turning right at that intersection. It's a really important thing for me to think about when looking at this. Of course, we want them going straight across to the bike facility. So that changed my mindset around the actually option B started feeling better to me. What I wanted to say is definitely I see room for the bike lane from 72nd to Rhododendron Park, and real consideration to what the best option is, getting the bikes across 68th to the facility to get across the bridge. I'm open, I'm definitely thinking a little bit more differently, but, and the thing that I also have in my mind is we're looking at the bike lane and the pedestrian facility because it makes sense to make these changes at the same time. Is that correct?
Not necessarily. So the biking alternatives are striping only, and the pedestrian facility would be some ground disturbing construction.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful to know, because what I really recalled that was bringing up this conversation was really the sidewalk piece. And so I was it sounds like the bike piece, I mean, anyway, it was just in my mind that the big conversation was the sidewalk piece more than the bike facility. So I was putting for myself priority on the pedestrian facility. But as I'm looking at this, I'm understanding how the bike facility would really be used. If there's a way to give consideration to signage, slow, traffic calming to that bottom part of 170th towards 68th Juanita, I think that option B works better for me than what I initially thought 40 minutes ago when we started this conversation. So I'm pretty open. The conservative part of me is like, I know our community is very more comfortable with what we have today because what it's known. But what I've seen happen with the engineering from your team, that your measurements of, calculations of actual traffic are very accurate. And I've been impressed. It feels like a big change, and I can see how our community would feel it's a big change. So I think definitely community input on this change is incredibly important. But I just wanted to share that. The longer I was sitting looking at these drawings, the more thoughts came to mind on how important this bike lane is to have it go all the way to 68th Juanita Drive. So whatever we can do to get there. And even if an alternative is a baby step from 72nd to Rhododendron Park while we figure out the rest of the striping down towards the intersection, I think that would be a step in the right direction. Thank you.
All right, we got we're going back around. We got council members Marshall, and then Baker, and then Shrevenick, and then File. Councilmember Marshall.
Very briefly, should courtesy gaps be encouraged or discouraged?
Discouraged. It feels rude, but block the driveway.
Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, I just really don't want to lose sight of the pedestrian problem with this whole section of street. There are no sidewalks for the most part. It's dirt. There are stone fences pushing people right up to the curb. And women with baby strollers, wheelchairs, they have to go in the street. They don't have any option. So I don't want to lose sight of the pedestrian safety here.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something that I said earlier or didn't say, that I do want to connect this for bikes. I think it is an important piece of our investments in the surrounding area that we've got bike lanes. My concern is the safety. I don't think our existing condition is safe, and we've had testimony that it isn't. You know, both of the alternatives that are presented have flaws. I mean, A does not direct bikes to go straight across exclusively. It looks like it's using both lanes. I don't know what bicyclists would think there. And B requires crossing by cars. So I guess I would definitely want input from people who actually bike regularly here before selecting an alternative. And in addition, if we choose either of these, I would want to see some additional safety measures around what is the buffering really going to look like, and how are we going to slow the traffic so that bicyclists can be safe. You know, for example, can we put the road on a road diet toward the end and provide room for both bikes and peds? You know, people go way too fast down that hill. And there's something about the, you know, as we've learned from you, that is partly a function of the engineering of the road. The road is signaling to us what speed we go. And so, you know, I mean, that's a bigger change, I understand, but I guess I'm hesitant to give bicyclists a signal that all is good when it's pretty scary.
May I clarify a point about the operation of the bike box in alternative A? So the cyclists would be positioned in front of those turn lanes, but they're not restricted to those turning movements that are printed there. They can line up, you know, 4 all in a row in front of each other and head across side by side the intersection. So they can go straight from anywhere within that bike box. They're not limited to right turns.
Could there be signage that says you're
Yes.
supposed to go straight,
Yeah,
not turn?
in fact, this is something that we've had, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but another
Okay.
thing we're discussing is signing on that mast arm to direct people to the multi-use path rather than turning left or right.
Councilmember File?
Thank you. So that kind of leads into that next thought I have is, you know, normally our cyclists can use the road similar to the 2 cars, right? So if we have a dedicated lane and you really are wanting the cyclist to use the dedicated lane and then cross, I've never seen a cyclist traffic sign that gives that kind of direction, let alone a code. So that's a little outside of my bailiwick. And I have a question about that. And 2, both at the Kenmore Rhododendron Park / a senior center area and 72nd could utilize a mirror to be able to see that back traffic coming at them as they're turning. It is very scary to turn out of there, especially when traffic's coming down that hill fast. And I can say that with my experience of driving that hill often and visiting that park often, especially when my kids were younger, let alone, you know, more recently just for good, healthy exercise. But I think some of our situation will be better improved with additional sidewalks, should we have alternative A. I still would really want to see just some additional safety layers. I noticed that City of Kirkland has been testing out flashing speed reduction signs and even flashing red stop signs, digital, solar charged. I think anything we can do to enhance safety and slow people down here will help both the residents and our communitors, and definitely tie in both to preserving the goals we have for Target Zero and our environmental and climate sustainability. So if we could do a little bit more, I'd be more in favor of alternative A with some adaptions. I still would like to see community engagement, like a focused session, both with the seniors, cyclists, and local residents, with that voice and seat at the table. I think this discussion is really important, and we might need to include some student youth who regularly either travel or travel by bike. I know what it's like to get hit by a van on a bike. I had that experience. I also know what it's like to have a cyclist hit you in the middle of your car flying down a road. So, you know, I wouldn't wish those situations on anyone. I thank you so much for all your time and effort. This is a whole lot of amazing work. And I know we're at a midpoint with it. So I look forward to what comes back to us next. And I look forward to hearing more from our community who's been here today and maybe those who are not present here. Thank you.
I want to fully recognize I'm not a traffic engineer, but Councilmember Sharp, and I realize that council members doing traffic engineering is an awful, awful thing. So all those caveats. I had a thought when Councilmember Shrubnik was speaking, and you can just say no, and that's fine. But I was thinking that there might be, you know, she was concerned about where bikers are directed to go, where they're set up before going through the intersection. What if you were to kind of do a hybrid where the bike box, you know, where bicyclists crossed over and there was still the right turn lane, but the bike box was just in the straight left area, giving them kind of the ability to go ahead of everyone without blocking the right turn lane, and with it being a little bit clearer that what we're trying to do is to get folks onto our bike facilities going either south of Juanita or north on the bridge.
I think adding a bike box to the left through lane in alternative B is definitely something that would be feasible, especially considering that the queuing space is not as critical for that area. So reduction of that queuing space would, I don't think, have a really any impact on delay at all. That would be something that we could add on that. It would still involve the right turn lane crossing in advance of the intersection to get them there.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments before we move on to sidewalks? All right, Mr. Vicente.
Okay, so 170th, almost forgot what the next topic was. So there has been discussions about sidewalk between 70th and 68th, and we definitely recognize the need for finishing up that pedestrian connection between 72nd and 68th. Within our pedestrian facilities plan, we did identify that as a project to build it fully out to our standard is about $2.5 million. Hard to say what's going to happen with how prices have changed since I've done that, but it's not a cheap fix. We don't have it in our budget. We don't have, I'm not sure what our revenues are looking like. I will actually be meeting with our finance director this week to kind of get a better handle on where we're at with that because of the grant funds that we've received. We have to provide match for those. So I'm having to figure all that out. But to address the question regarding putting a bike facility at the backside or away from the travel lane, much like with the full build out sidewalk, it would be quite expensive. There's the possibility of pushing the curb line to the south and lining it up with the, where you see right now in the image there with the buffered lane to provide less take from the private property owners. But no matter how you slice it, you're gonna have quite an impact to the trees that are there. There are a lot of significant trees along that segment that would, either proposal would likely have to come out. And so that is something that council would have to take into consideration. The further north we go from that rock wall that exists, the more we wind up impacting the existing trees. I've got some, I want to show you some existing pictures here. This is just what's existing at just west of 72nd. But if you're familiar, this is the existing soft path that everybody has to walk on if they don't want to cross 72nd, if they're coming down the street. Unfortunately, the folks who live here have no choice but to walk this area. Area I'm talking about, you see all the trees, the shrubs, you got this wall. It's just a myriad of impacts if you want to widen that area to provide a place for bikes, a place for sidewalk, plus a buffer. The reason why I say that is if you move everything over, move the curb over to the street, you're going to want a buffer for the pedestrians because then you're going to have the cars zipping by them. So you want that 4-foot buffer that we have in our plans. You could put the bicyclists there, but then you kind of have cars zooming by, bikes sitting there, and there's no level of comfort. So having that separation is important for bicyclist comfort that they're all concerned about. So the bike lane, they need you need 5 feet typically. If you've got pedestrians next to it, you want a little bit more, so there's a buffer between the bicyclist and the pedestrian. So pushing yourself further north winds up taking out more and more. So there's no easy solution. There's no easy solution for putting in pedestrian facilities. One of the things that I did look at, I went out there and I did some measurements, and you've got roughly 4 feet between the curb and that little rock wall that exists. This one here, roughly 4 feet. There are some utility poles that would have to be relocated. There's a mailbox that restricts the width from 4 feet, but if you move it, I think it's like 20, 30 feet to the west, then you'll get your 4-foot clearance. This area right here specifically. Those mailboxes right there don't provide you the space you need, so you'd have to move them down 2 driveways to the east to provide the space that you need. That's what you would have to do. But we could conceivably look into the option of putting in sidewalk within that available space. It gives a hard surface, makes it easier to walk. If you have a bike lane adjacent to the curb line, then that gives you that buffer from the vehicles. If you take the bike lane at least to the rhododendron side where the sidewalk curves out away from the roadway, I can show that right there, then you create some of that buffer for the pedestrians. The cost of that really depends on what you do. It could be between $100,000 to $200,000, and it's relatively inexpensive because really all you're doing is removing some dirt and throwing in some concrete. You're not building curb, gutter. You're not doing all the little fancy things you have to do to make a sidewalk work. Your cost is going to vary depending upon whether or not you replace the driveways. The driveways are not ADA compliant. Let me backtrack a quick sec here. If we're going to build a sidewalk, it needs to be ADA compliant. We don't want to build something that doesn't meet the needs for everybody. And so these driveways are not ADA compliant. They are a hard surface that makes it easier to traverse back and forth, but their cross slopes do not meet the requirements for ADA. Not to mention there's some potential trip hazards. I haven't looked at all of them for sure, but to make these driveways compliant requires us to do some grading back on the adjacent properties. You see with the driveway here, that back of sidewalk would drop 6 inches. And so you'd have to grade back and make those fixes. That would be a low cost option. Again, the high cost is to build out the full curb gutter sidewalk. What we can do is we can take a look at it, do some research. 1, see what we can do. 2, look at our funding, see if we can find the money to do something that at least provides accessibility. And then I can come back to council. We have to do an amendment to the CIP this spring, and we can come back to council with options for that if we can find the money, or at least explain why we can't do it at this time. But that's kind of what I'm proposing at this time, is just give us a couple of months to look at what we can do. Again, I don't want to make any promises because I don't know what our funding is like at this point. We need to really get a handle on that based off of these potential these potential grants that we're going to be getting here soon. So, but that's the options with the sidewalk. It's not a cheap option. There's a big reason why it hasn't been built is it's not cheap. It's not very competitive for grants. You're just building a sidewalk, and the grant agencies want to see more than just a sidewalk. They didn't give us funding for the sidewalk that I asked for it by the high school. And that's a more hazardous condition than this. There's nowhere for the kids to walk. They actually have to go in the street. And that didn't score very well. That scored really low, because there was nothing but a sidewalk. That's kind of how they're deciding how to award grants now. They have a list of several things, and each box you check yes, you get a point. And with here, I'm checking one box versus the 10 that they have. So that's why this is a very difficult one to fund. And my instincts tell me that if we want to build sidewalk there, it's going to come mostly from city dollars. So that's something that has to be considered. But take any questions council might have regarding pedestrian facilities.
Councilor Shubak.
Well, you just piqued my interest with the 10 boxes. What are the other things they're looking for? I don't understand.
They look at whether you've got enhanced crossing, pedestrian lighting, bike lanes, buffered bike lanes, bike boxes.
So if we combine these projects, we'd be competitive or more competitive?
We'd be more competitive, but adding a bike lane with a buffer just checks one box.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, because it's either a bike lane or
Okay.
a bike lane with buffer.
All right.
You don't get
Well,
both.
I think we should connect these, and I'm a big proponent of it doesn't have to be perfect. So yeah, please come back with some options.
Councilor File.
Thank you. So of course, I'm a big proponent for sidewalks, level sidewalks. So that people of any mobility can access the community. It is a investment in our community. It's an investment in our neighborhoods, and it adds the value of homes. I would hope that we could find a pathway. I know everything now has to have an equity kind of addition to it. So not just that regular score sheet, but the additions of how it is the community is served there, what's local to it, and how it's being accessed beyond the park and the senior center. But I'd also wonder what would it take to put the utilities underground. Most of the time, and this is a great opportunity to do that, to put a access box for ease of access. I'd also want to see some sort of improvement for our community. If we're moving their mailboxes, I certainly hope that we can do a little bit more than just move their mailboxes, rather maybe replace the mailboxes with locking mailboxes. I think that is a commitment to the community and working together and meeting mutual needs that coexist. And I know that doesn't necessarily connect with the sidewalk issue. However, mailbox security and mailbox theft is rather high in the area. So that's what I have to offer there.
And within our standards, we do put that in there that if there are non-locking mailboxes, that we need to make an effort to see if people want that. The property owners are not obligated to go into it. It's their choice. And the post office does not enforce use of locking mailboxes. They can only do that if they're brand new. So if it's an existing, they are allowed to have what they currently have. Now we can move them, but we can't change them if the property owners don't want that. That being said, we try and encourage people to go into those locking mailboxes, but the flip side is they require more space. So again, I mean, unfortunately, when it comes to safety and to doing what's best for our environment and multimodal, it requires space. It requires some sort of sacrifice that we can't, I mean, again, as Tobin had mentioned, if this is a total rebuild, then it would be much easier, but we're trying to expand a 100 square foot kitchen to 200 square feet, and all we have to choose from is our living room and our dining room, which what are we going to get rid of? So that's kind of what we're up against. And so it's very difficult. And it's one of the challenges that we as engineers and our engineering groups have to make is how do we fit all of the needs into a tiny little box?
I appreciate that. I support bike walkers, the addition of, and regardless of a person's age, a person's ability to access the community and mobility is really important. And so those level surfaces help improve opportunities to improve healthy life outcomes and longer life. And when you have a place you can walk safely. And for those who have to shop by foot, and with more people downsizing, we have to think about how people are accessing other community, whether they're visiting the pantry there or whether they're walking all the way to the grocery store and back with a cart. That is, aspect of community. So I absolutely support improving the accessibility for mobility and multimodal routes. And I'm sure our community would support that. What do we do about something like this rock wall? It seems to be in a right of way. How do we mitigate something like that or work with local residents?
Well, if the wall's in the right of way, we have the option to either retain and work around it, or we remove it and replace it with a different wall, a different location if it's in the way of our improvement. There are options that, again, it gets into, okay, how much property do I then have to take from someone to preserve something such as that? Am I going to have to take out another tree just to provide that? So again, it's trying to balance all of the needs. In this particular instance, based off of what we see here, we would be better off probably removing the wall and putting in our standard cross section because that would have the least amount of impact to the adjacent properties and potentially the least impact of trees. If you look further down the street there, I don't know if I can see the pointer. Yeah, right in this area. The only way we're going to prevent disruption to those trees would be to not build the amenity strip. Otherwise, the sidewalk is going to intrude on the roots and we would have to take the trees out. We can't use, if you're familiar with the bridges that we were putting in for 73rd, we couldn't do that there because of the driveways. So the trees would have to go unless I build maybe just a sidewalk as it's shown there and not do the amenity strip. So those are the things that we have to look at and try and figure out how can we provide, all of the things that we want. And for my recommendation, the best solution would be to preserve those trees would be to have the bike lane, which provides you a buffer and have the sidewalk right next to it. It's not perfect, but it saves those gorgeous trees.
I appreciate that. And I could support something like that. I think I'm just going to leave it at that for today. I know that walkability is really important to our community and our neighborhoods. And I think our neighbors in this area would appreciate improved walkability and being able to see, because you really have to nose all the way out there to be able to see what's coming uphill. And that's why I made the reference of the mirrors that you can also use in some situations to be able to see get a better view. So thank you so much.
Deputy Mayor.
I just, two things. I think this stretch of sidewalk is incredibly important, and we're going to have to get creative to find the funding for this. So I appreciate you drawing attention to the issues getting to the funding and highlighting that it's going to be challenging. I agree with Councilmember Shrevenick that combining the bike lane with the sidewalk, if that's a way for us to get more points, something about those two items, they go together intrinsically in a way, in my mind. But if that can help us get more points on grants, that's great. If we're going to, we may have to find, but it sounds like we're going to have to find budget to do this. And it's worth it to our community. It's a critical intersection, goes into one of our parks. And, it's the beginning of the pathway up to Inglemoor High School on the north side of Simons Road. So I fully support making this safer and more user-friendly for pedestrians. And again, the bike safety side, of course, is important too. But yeah, this is an important project. I'm glad you brought it to us today. And I know that if there's a will, there's a way that we can get the funding to get this done. Thank you.
Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you. I have a clarifying question about what we're looking into further, and that is, I know this is a strip that's part of our pedestrian facility plan, and so it's been prioritized, I believe, as part of that plan. So are you suggesting some sort of in-between that is not quite sidewalk like what we talked about as part of the pedestrian facility plan? Is that what you're proposing?
As an interim, yes, I would be proposing something that does not match our standard and is not what's specifically called out within our pedestrian facilities plan. It would just provide accessibility.
Okay. Well, I mean, as just a comment, I mean, clearly the fact that the path has been worn down by people walking in this area, like it is definitely highly trafficked and used. I think if we could put something as an in-between that and find funding for it, I would definitely be in favor of that.
All right, and I want to thank you for your creativity around this, John. I think it's sometimes I think we let the perfect get in the way of the good, and I think this is an area where we have needed to make this improvement for a long time. So I fully support us trying to figure out how to get there. Even if it's not perfect, and if we are going to essentially use the bike lane as a buffer, then I would push that we maybe make it even more of a buffer by adding the flexible stanchions or something else, just to further kind of psychologically separate pedestrians from the cars that are going downhill, because we all know that folks are speeding heading that direction. And that's something else we need to figure out. I don't know how we figure that out along Simons. But even just that extra little bit of even just the plastic stanchions, I think, would be a positive step towards making it more comfortable for pedestrians, even if there's bikes right next to them. But I appreciate you really, getting creative, because sometimes engineers, they just open the book and they go, well, that's not the book. So I appreciate that. Any other comments? I am not seeing any. Is there anything else that you have, John?
Nothing. I just wanted to make sure that we heard council clearly. Regarding the sidewalk, we're going to do some investigation to see what we can do, what it would take to do, and provide some options for council in a couple of months when we bring an update to the CIP. Regarding the existing conditions out there for the roadway, I do need a little more clarification as to which direction council would like us to, what approach like us to take right now. My recommendation would be that we, as a minimum, stripe in a bike lane down to Rhododendron Park and then continue with the shared use from that point until we have a chance to further evaluate what we can do to make that as safe as practical, and then come back with council with our option.
Yeah, I didn't hear anybody objecting to the bike lane running up to the park. I think the whole question was how we integrated at the intersection. Councilmember Marshall?
So that'd be proposal of a minimum striping the bike lane down to the intersection and then not having the box at this point, or any of the boxes, right?
No, I think we can stand to spend a little bit of extra time to look at what might be work well here to answer to address all of your concerns.
Okay, great. And the
Yeah.
bike lane stays on the right side, or stays on the, next to the curb then, I guess, right?
Oh, hold on.
Is that what?
So
being
I
proposed?
think this would be taking the bike lane down to either the rhododendron park access or to the maintenance access where they have an opportunity to get on the sidewalk.
Yeah, either one, yeah.
But not so far that we'd have to change, we'd start to mess with the intersection turn lanes for that short area.
Okay, but it stays next to the curb, correct?
Yeah, it would be along the curb.
Okay, thank you.
Until roughly that gore striped area in the picture, I think.
Yeah, I think we have consensus around that, so. Anything, Councilmember Fowle?
I had one other thought. You know, it has come to my attention that you can now have traffic cameras, speed traffic cameras near parks. And I hope that we don't have to go all the way that direction. But if we have to, and we're not getting the reduction of speeds, I would be open to that for the safety of our community.
I mean, I think we're all also interested in whatever other creative solutions you might have for slowing down folks on Simons, but that's a whole different discussion, so.
Tobin's very creative in that respect, so.
I mean, I think we need to get creative on it because people are speeding down that hill. I see it every time I drive down that hill, and I think, you know, if that means tightening things up to 10 feet, if that means, I don't know what, but there has to be something better because people just get going and then they don't slow down, so. But that's a discussion for a different day.
Yep.
All right, well, thank you very much for the presentation. Unless there's any, Councilmember Kugler, I'm so sorry.
Sorry, I do have one additional question because I'm not clear on what we're discussing. Are we talking about that first driveway entrance into rhododendron and not taking the bike path all the way to 68? Because I think we do need some sort of agreement on what bicyclists will do from rhododendron's entrance to 68.
I think what was being proposed is that we don't have agreement on what would happen at the intersection. So we would put the bike lane as far as we can right now, leaving room for us to then have a further discussion on how it approaches the intersection and how bicyclists interact with the intersection. Does that make sense?
Great. Okay. Thank you.
And then in the interim, it would just be a shared use as it currently stands.
Deputy Mayor, was your hand up?
Just temporarily, I was just going to agree with what was said, so I put it down. Thank you.
All right, just want to double check. All right, well, unless there's anything else, unless there's any objection, I want to thank you guys for the presentation. Unless there's any objection, the Kenmore City Council will take a 10-minute recess and come back at 9:28. Saying no objection, let's take a break. Kenmore City Council will come back into session. Next on the agenda, ordinance number 23-0573 regarding the use of personal flotation devices on waterways in the city of Kenmore while using human-powered watercraft, presented by Police Chief Brandon Moen. Chief Moen.
Yes, thank you. So this was an issue that came up last year during the retreat. The council had asked that we look into it and have staff come up with a proposal regarding personal flotation devices. This is fairly straightforward. I'm going to run through it quickly. So currently state law requires that vessels, boats, they're not human powered, depending on the size, have to have life jackets on board, and depending on the age of the occupant, they may need to be wearing them. But that doesn't apply necessarily to those human powered watercraft. So that's what we're trying to address here. Obviously, there's drownings continue to be an issue. We just had one in South King County in the lake, rather tragic, and not only the victim drowned, but there's a person who tried to rescue them, had survived, but was in serious condition because of the rescue attempts. So this is an ongoing issue, even during the colder months in all of the waters around King County. So we're trying to be proactive in addressing this as a public safety issue. Obviously, the waterways here are well used by a number of uses, and so we have a lot of conflicts involving boats, canoes, seaplanes, all coming into the same area, particularly around the slough and the lake. And so there's the possibility to have this proposed ordinance would require that occupants, or users, I should say, of a human-powered watercraft use a properly fitted, approved personal flotation device. So we're talking typical canoes, kayaks, rowboats, paddle boards, those smaller type human-powered watercraft that are very common here in Kenmore and on all of Lake Washington. There are exceptions built into this proposed ordinance specifically for training activities, so that if it's a rowing club or something similar to that, a coach or instructor or supervisor of some type just needs to be nearby in a motorized watercraft to supervise that activity. So those people would be from the ordinance. This is really intended to be educational in nature, and that was what was brought up at the retreat. And the hope of the council at the time was that we take an educational approach. So the ordinance does allow for first-time offense to be nothing more than a warning, informing the user that this is a requirement in Kenmore, on Kenmore waters, to be wearing a personal flotation device. And should they be contacted again, then they would be fined. And third offense within a 6-month period, they would get an additional fine, because obviously they're not getting the picture at that point. I would not anticipate it getting to that point of a second or third fine. Typically, a warning normally gets someone's attention, and the Marine unit for the sheriff's office that we contract with would certainly very familiar with enforcing this type of ordinance, and understands that their intent is educational in nature. So this is modeled very similar to Lake Forest Parks ordinance that they passed a few years ago. As I mentioned, it was supported by the King County Sheriff's Office Marine Unit. The Marine Sergeant stated he was very supportive of this. He views it as another tool to keep people safe on the waters. Obviously, they see a lot of issues all around King County, and so they're well versed at the need for people to be wearing these personal flotation devices. So they ultimately will be the ones enforcing this for the most part, as opposed to our patrol officers who are on land. So they are happy to see this eventually moving forward. And with that, any questions?
Councilmember Trebnick.
This is great. My question, maybe it's just clarifying. So this would be, I think it's the case, we're talking about actually wearing it as opposed to having it on the flotation device, right?
Correct.
Which is actually a higher standard than for powered boats.
Correct.
Okay.
For vessels under 19 feet, you're just required to have it
I know.
available.
I know, which
So-
I think it's ridiculous, but anyway.
Unless you're a child, and then you have to be wearing it.
Yeah, so I mean, I actually don't have any problem with this. I actually think there should be a higher standard for powered vessels. And my guess is there's a heck of a lot more accidents and drownings related to powered vessels than human powered. Is that an accurate statement? Of course, there's a lot more of them.
Yeah, I
So
think just
maybe
the raw
not.
numbers. there
It's
would
the
be
raw,
more,
yeah,
but-
right. So
but
that's
I
not a
would
fair
say that
comparison, but
the human powered are more vulnerable in the sense that they do not have anything else to cling to. If you lose your canoe or your paddle board, you're on your own. Whereas as a boat, hopefully there's someone else there on the boat that can assist you and rescue. But
maybe, yeah.
But I consider the human powered ones to be a bit more vulnerable, which are
Okay.
addressed.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. I did have a follow-up issue that I was hoping maybe somebody would address, but maybe everybody's gone. My issue was less about this, although I'm supportive of it, and more about, can we get PFDs at our parks, at our waterfront parks? Yeah.
So that was something that we've been discussing. Jennifer Gordon with Public Works has staff that's assigned to a project to hopefully provide where you could rent or borrow, I should say, borrow is the word I'm looking for. Borrow a life jacket at our parks, particularly at Log Boom, and then hopefully return it when you're done. So that is a project that is in the works that Jennifer's working on.
Great. I mean, I'm hoping we're talking about both Chalatsodies and Log Boom.
Yes.
Ultimately.
I think
Okay.
ultimately that's.
Okay,
yeah.
good, cool, thank you.
Councilor File?
Thank you. I'm so excited about this. Any opportunity we can help reduce harmful outcomes by encouraging and supporting people in their active play on the water is great. One, I was thinking about the levels of education and fines. So absolutely, education should always come first. I would like to see a coupling of a required community service and fine on that third offense, and an option of fine or community service on the second offense. I think if we create equitable opportunities and options, we have greater buy-in. And two, I noticed that the city of Kirkland, when making life preservers available, they had not yet had an ordinance passed, but they are considering one after we do. But they have made life preservers available to their parks and local rec centers, as well as City Hall. They brand them. Originally, I think they made them available in buckets. Hopefully people return them. If they don't, we're happy they're using them, right? And any opportunity we can reduce drowning is good, in my opinion. I like to see something that they're doing, not necessarily the bucket method, but they have developed like little kiosk stations. They look like a little arched roof and kind of capacities where you can just kind of hang the life preservers and have them available along with signage. I think that makes good sense. I'd like to see us do something like that, along with branding. And I know that some of our staff has worked on programming like that in the past. But it would be nice to be able to have a year where we don't have an unfortunate drowning occur within our city limits, and then also close the gap on the north end of the lake. So thank you for your work on this.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing this forward. This seems pretty straightforward, and I'm supportive. And going to what Councilmember File and Councilmember Shrubnik were saying, I think we just, get some life preservers and like write on them really ugly city of Kenmore. You don't want to make it look good. So it's usable, but nobody wants to take it home.
Yeah.
You know, if it's branded all nice, somebody might decide, hey, I want that swag. Any other comments? Councilmember Kugler.
Hi, Chief Moen. Thank you so much for doing this research and bringing it back. I agree with what my fellow council members have already said. I just wanted to share one fact that I learned myself about this topic that might just be beneficial for the general public. And that is, I think some people might see this more as like, you know, that we might not be trusting, that people know their ability levels. But I think one factor that a lot of people underestimate when it comes to the lake is the temperature. And that can really cause a lot of problems for people that they don't expect. So I totally support this proposal as it's been presented tonight, and I appreciate your research and work on this. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right.
So this is slated for public safety hearing workshop on April 24th. So
Consent
back
agenda
on, so we could take a vote, or the council could take a vote at that point.
That's my fault.
Thank you. I look forward to this coming back to us. And should we adopt it later, and I hope we do, I would like to see some community engagement, maybe combined with their summer market and other events. And I see your team and our partners as great allies in this potential work. So with that, I just want to thank you again. Health, safety, and well-being are the cornerstone of your work, and they're often very much the cornerstone of our caring for our community. So thank you.
Councilor Shubnik.
Oh, that got me thinking. At our opening of the park on May 6th, too, that'd be a good opportunity to advertise.
Anything further? All right, thank you very much, Chief Moen. Really appreciate you staying. Next on the agenda is staff reports.
I don't have anything to report tonight.
That is the correct answer at 9:43. Council member reports and comments. Councilmember Marshall.
Wanted to thank both the groups who came out for the Veterans Memorial proposals this evening. Thanks to both those groups and our Kenmore Historical Society.
Councilmember Shubnik.
Nothing to add, although I do hope we do get a staff report soon about the cap. Thanks.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. I just want to thank everybody for a great meeting. It's been a lot of a really good discussion tonight on the policy before us. And I'm looking forward to the summer events coming up this summer and our opening of the market. We have so many wonderful, beautiful things happening in Kenmore, and I'm just thrilled. So with that, I'm just going to kind of leave it for a close. Thank you.
Councilmember Baker.
Yes, thank you very much. And I agree. Nothing further to add is something that you like to hear when it is 12:44 in the morning. Good night, everybody.
Councilmember Kugler.
It depends on how you look at it.
I have nothing. I also have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
And I don't have anything to add either. So with nothing more to come before us, Kenmore City Council is adjourned.